Hello and welcome to Expert Panel Discussion with me, Stephen Humphrey. Today our panel members are Anne Stokes and Brian Dragoo, and I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves, please. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name's Anne Stokes. I'm Group Chief Operating Officer for FNZ, a global software and services company supporting the financial services sector.
And I'm Brian Dragoo, Marketing Director at Viagogo, which is an online ticket exchange in Europe.
Today our experts are going to discuss the issues related to implementation in and around the strategic planning activity within a business. So let's get to the point. This particular implementation, as you know from the case study, is about a government initiative to relocate activity. So let's start with the idea that it's government, it's public sector, it's slow, it's cumbersome, it's an economic downturn, yet suddenly we want to relocate all our services and all our people. It's not going to work, is it, Anne?
Not without a lot of planning. I think if I put myself into the context of what I would see as the real challenges, I think making sure the communication is spot on as to why. It's riddled with potential flaws around communication with people, with the receiving local authorities and stuff like that. I'd be very nervous about this.
Brian, your initial perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with any types of large mass, movement of people and things like this, I think it's always complex, and having the right communication is definitely essential. And then also just really being able to evaluate the risks that you have within the organization, so you can hedge those as much as possible.
Interesting, you both talk about communication, but I wonder really whether or not communication is enough. You've got a bunch of people here in this public sector being kicked back, very, very lazy, let's say. Really, is communication going to get them motivated? Are they really going to want to move?
I think the fundamental question for me is, what exactly are the 4,000 people doing at head office? Now, that fills me with the first question of, you've got a branch network, what's the relationship between the branch and head office? What do the functions do? Are they there for policy? Are they there for frontline administration? Or does that happen at the branch networks? Once you understand what the concepts are that are the activities at head office, then you can take a view as to what actually is going to move. Because rather than just taking the problem of 4,000 in London and putting 4,000 in Cumbria or Highlands or some other place, all you're doing is just changing the geography. You're not dealing with the problem of, have you got right person, right role, have you got the most efficient organisational structure, and are actually using technologies to the most advantage.
Interesting. I mean, Brian, I'm going to come over to you on that point. I mean, that sounds great. Yeah, but really in the government sector, are they going to waste time on mapping and checking people out and being efficient about their move? Don't they just want to move? And the minister said so, it's going to happen, and that's that.
Well, I think that's true, but you really have no context of if these people will move, like Anne said. So there's a huge risk to the organization if you find out that 75% of these people don't want to move, or how do you work with these? Where are the essential functions? And then you really have to determine that there's going to be people that you want to keep, and there's people that you don't necessarily mind if they leave. So you really need to figure that out before you make the move, determine what's essential, and then go forward.
So what's the role here of stakeholder engagement? I mean, it's evident there are a lot of stakeholders here involved in this activity, as there are in any change management or implementation activity. But how crucial is stakeholder engagement or understanding here in this context?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. If government's got an ideal opportunity, but also responsibility to demonstrate to people, demonstrate to other businesses, be it small enterprises or the big privates, that engaging people can be done efficiently and effectively. Now, efficiently might mean taking a little bit longer, but once you actually get people to understand and understand objectively the reason for a move and the reason for a change, then you get less resistance. So it's almost the managerial courage to stop, pause, plan it carefully, and then go, because otherwise you'll lose people and the grassroots resistance will just go flying through. You see it in the documentation about the hostility from the HR organisation, the nervousness from the receiving local authority organisation. There's a political dynamic in that, I'm sure.
I've no doubt.
But the communication, you get people with you, and get them to understand why, then they help in terms of setting out what the criteria is for the move. And indeed, actually, could come up with some very good ideas around job share, home working, different ways of working, integrated working.
Okay, it's an interesting word, integrated. Brian, your perspective, do you agree with that? Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Anne entirely in terms of getting the people involved, because the more people you get involved, the less resistance you'll have. And so you really need to have at least an effort from management that you're actually involving these people at the bottom levels, really.
Okay. What's the role of, let me go on a limit, what's the role of marketing here?
Be careful about whether that's seen as spin. If you can trip too much into, well, that's the spin engine coming to the fore, and as long as you've got objective data and people can see that there is a potential benefit for them in terms of the move, and I go back to this work-life balance, corporate social responsibility, green agenda, you choose your win themes, for want of a better expression. You choose your win themes for the move. It's not just financial. Right, there's so much more that, this guy's been told he's got a selling job to do. Actually, what he's got to do is an analysis of what can be in it for the people that are affected. And that could be the branches in terms of better career opportunities for the people that are within the branch network.
Okay.
So that's an upside for the wider. And then, the 4,000 people, 1,000 of them might actually want to retire early, or might want to think about becoming coaches and mentors to other people elsewhere.
Okay, so it's interesting. So we talk about these kind of metrics, if you like, for success, or performance indicators, or whatever the heck we want to call them these days. Brian, how do you see additional metrics being applied to this success of this approach?
Well, first of all, you have to figure out if it achieved what you wanted to achieve. I mean, obviously, you're moving these people, 4,000 people away or less than that, and it's obviously having some sort of financial impact. So one, you do need to track that to make sure that has happened. You have to look at, obviously, you should probably have some sort of goal of the people that you want to retain. So make sure that you're keeping up with that goal, and you're shifting your needs as necessary while you're trying to obtain that goal. And then I think third, there's, as Anne was saying, kind of these softer things where you actually have to look at if the people are transitioning appropriately and if their morale really is with the move. Okay,
that's interesting. So softer metrics, we might say. Maybe some of the things you're describing here. That's a bit of a new one for government, isn't it?
Oh, no, actually, my perspective, and years ago, I was actually in government, so I can sort of gatekeeper turned poacher. They have always had very clear policies and procedures, and lived the Whitley committees, the special interest groups, probably more advanced in terms of their thinking around the green agenda and what have you than we give them credit for. They probably haven't communicated it very well, but they have been thinking. So therefore, the softer side of things is something that is very much there. But the challenge is working out the weighting. How valuable is that? But it's becoming more valuable in terms of ensuring that employee satisfaction, employee morale, less sickness, people wanting to stay rather than wanting to leave.
That's interesting. I think, Brian, you mentioned this word transition of people from a current situation to a new situation. So it's interesting to hear that. What about this contemporary and rather off the wall, some might argue, issue of, well, you don't really need any metrics at all, actually. It's much more intuitive in its success. Forget your financials. They'll come if we do it right.
I think there's probably a natural course of action, so it will probably function on its own, and there are these other metrics that you may be tracking. But I still think you need to look at least did it achieve its goal. If you do nothing else, you need to at least make sure that you've done that, or why are you doing the transition at all?
Okay, and just as a sort of a final point before we conclude, this idea of chaos, and chaos finds its natural order, therefore we don't really need to worry about it. What's your perspective?
You always have to worry. A transition of this nature by its own style will need a heavy involvement of leadership, The person at the top has got to put an awful lot of energy, be very visible themselves in terms of how they make this happen. But the key to the success of it, and therefore, I do agree that you can't have thousands of metrics. You've just got to choose very carefully the ones you track, will be the ones that encourage early adoption of the change.
Well, that's great. That's really been some very, very interesting discussion. But from the perspective of our learners and our viewers here, let's get down to business. Yeah, we've given them 3 options in terms of how they would improve this move or facilitate this move and how they're going to measure it. So I'm going to give you those 3 options. I need you to choose one and justify why. So option 1 was suggesting in internal-based activity, simple communication, top-down, explain the benefits and invite feedback, participation, metrics, financial. Option 2, internal activity around a fully integrated marketing campaign, top-down corporate involvement, and integrated into the strategic plan. Metrics, a balanced set of metrics, financial and non-financial. Third option, fully integrate internal, external campaign, split it, break it down by stakeholder groups, and don't use any metrics at all. Anne, what do you think?
On paper, theoretical, I would probably do B, and in practical terms, I'd do C.
Excellent.
And the reason I'd do that is because I think the way to make any complex change programme work, you've got to get under the skin of what makes it valuable to the person that's receiving the change. And therefore, you've then got to be sensitive to what you're tracking. And it's not always financial. The benefits here are financial. There will be financial, there will be some cultural, there'll be the wider political benefits and examples to private sector. But actually, the success of this will be how the individual responds to it, in my view.
Great, thank you. Brian?
I'm going to be slightly controversial and say I think it's part A and B, I think. And so why I think this is, one, in terms of simple communication, I think it's important to broadly convey the message of why we're doing this so they know why the transition is happening, but then allow them, through the use of technology, to really find out more on their own and then have resources for where they can, that's another form of communication method. And then secondly, I think with solution B, where there's a balanced set of metrics. So I'm not purely on the financial metrics. I think you have to have the financial metrics to know that you have achieved your goal and what you've set out to do. But really, there's some other metrics that you should really be tracking, and that's going to be morale and opportunity to your existing employees, and then really, I think that risk, that hedging of the risk, which I mentioned before.
That's interesting. Thanks, guys. I just want to come back to you, Anne, the point that you made. Yeah, on paper, option B. In practice, option C. Are you really advocating in option C? No metrics, chaos, leave it, don't measure a thing.
Yeah, actually, yes, I am, because the natural order of things will come to the fore. But if you put too many metrics in place, you stifle what could actually be a better answer at the end. And everybody is an individual, and you need to find, this goes back to what I said earlier about the analysis of why do we need to move, what's in it for the individual, be it corporate social responsibility, work-life balance, job share, integrated working. You find the hook that then somebody then goes, yeah, I want to do that. And that makes it then a more successful programme. But if everything is just governed around 3 or 4 points, that's somebody else's agenda, that isn't the one of the team.
Fascinating. Thank you. So what have we learned? Implementation is complex, it's difficult, it's time-consuming. But there are a number of ways of getting this right, or certainly improving the experience for everyone involved. And so what you've seen today is that there isn't necessarily one particular solution, but maybe a combination. Planning and implementation is far more complex than perhaps we give it credit for. This has been Expert Panel Discussion with me, Stephen Humphrey.